Hey everyone, sometimes we'll hear where people will say that the serpent in the garden lied to trick Eve into eating the forbidden fruit. But is this what really happened? Let's check it out. Shalom everybody and welcome to Beit Tefillah. Today I want to examine what transpired between the serpent and Eve in the Garden of Eden. And we'll find out if the serpent deceived her by lying or what actually happened there. But first we need to get some backstory. When Elohim created mankind, he desired a group of people that would love him and serve him of their own free will. He wanted them to have the ability to choose to do so or not. You know, if you can't choose, then you don't have free will, then do you? But if Elohim hadn't put anything in place to tempt them and to pull the people away or lure them away from him, then how did he give any balance to their choice in this test? He had to create something that would become an adversary or Hasatan to the people to find out who would return back to him and obey everything that he commanded. It literally is a necessary evil and incorporated into the plan of mankind by Elohim. So let's start at Genesis chapter 2 and work our way through this. Genesis 2:15 to 17. And Yehovah Elohim took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to guard it. And Yehovah Elohim commanded the man, saying, Eat of every tree of the garden, but do not eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for in the day that you eat of it, you shall certainly die. So let's take note right off the bat that Elohim told this to Adam. Eve hadn't been created yet. And we can read that in the following verses in Genesis 2:21 to 22. So this came after what Elohim told him. So Yehovah Elohim caused a deep sleep to fall on the man, and he slept. And he took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh in its place. And the rib which Yehovah Elohim had taken from the man he made into a woman, and he brought her to the man. So clearly Eve was created after Elohim told Adam about that particular tree and that the eating of its fruit was forbidden. So now let's examine the serpent tempting Eve. Genesis 3:1 to 5. And the serpent was more crafty than any beast of the field which Yehovah Elohim had made, and he said to the woman, Is it true that Elohim has said, Do not eat of every tree of the garden? And the woman said to the serpent, We are to eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden Elohim has said, Do not eat of it, nor touch it, lest you die. And the serpent said to the woman, You shall certainly not die. For Elohim knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes shall be open, and you shall be like Elohim, knowing good and evil. So let's read that last verse again. Was that a lie? Elohim knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes shall be open, and you shall be like Elohim, knowing good and evil. Well, after Adam and Eve ate the fruit and sinned, it's written that Elohim said this, is recorded in Genesis 3:22. And Yehovah Elohim said, See, the man has become like one of us to know good and evil. So, no, there was no lie told by the serpent there. That's exactly what happened, as we can read. And now let's examine this in Genesis 3:4. And the serpent said to the woman, You shall certainly not die. Was that a lie? Elohim had told Adam, as recorded in Genesis 2:17. But of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat of it, for in the day that you eat of it you shall surely die. The ancient Hebrew text says mot tamut, or you will surely die. This means more or less that eventually one day you're going to die. This is not immediate death like somebody would take a cyanide capsule and drop dead. That's not what it's referring to. The consequence of eating the forbidden fruit was sinning and eventual death. Genesis 3:4. And the serpent said to the woman, You shall certainly not die. The correct ancient Hebrew text states that the woman said temutun, or you must die. So Eve got it wrong. Remember that Elohim told Adam mot tamut, which implies you will die eventually. Temutun, or what Eve said, is more of an instant death similar to a deadly poison, as if she would have eaten the fruit and dropped dead right away, like the cyanide capsule. So what Eve said wasn't what Elohim had warned Adam. So what the serpent said to her was correct. There was no lie there either. The serpent said to her, You're not going to drop dead immediately. Because Eve got it wrong. Continuing. Genesis 3:6. And the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree desirable to make one wise, and she took of its fruit and ate. Okay, here's what really happened. Here's the real deal. Notice how she starts to look at this tree with new eyes, and she begins to desire this fruit. Let's read this verse one more time, and we'll hear how the image of the tree and its fruit had changed in her mind. Genesis 3:6. And the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree desirable to make one wise, and she took of its fruit and ate. So it started out that Eve didn't know Elohim's word well enough, and because she was tempted, not lied to, she disobeyed Elohim and ate of it, which is sin. So the serpent was an adversary to Eve, tempting her away from obedience to Elohim, but through her own free will. Eve simply made a choice. Eve looked upon the tree's fruit with new eyes and ended up putting her own desire over the command of Elohim. Let me ask something very important. If Elohim didn't want Adam and Eve to eat from the tree of knowledge and good and evil, then why did he put it in the middle of the garden in the first place? Think about it. That's like saying when he put that tree there, he had no idea that they'd ever disobey him and eat from it. He told them to tend it. He knew what was going to happen. There was a different tree in the garden which they had to eat from, which was called the tree of life. After their sin, Elohim kicked them out of the garden so they couldn't continue to eat from that tree and live forever in their sin. Let's read that. Genesis 3:22-23. And Yehovah Elohim said, See, the man has become like one of us to know good and evil. And now lest he put his hand out and also take of the tree of life and eat and live forever. So Yehovah Elohim sent him out of the Garden of Eden. Let's say you have a 3-year-old child. Would you take a big old candy bar and sit it right in front of him on a coffee table and say, Don't you dare eat that? You know that kid is eventually going to cave into temptation and eat that candy bar. If you don't want him eating it, you wouldn't leave it there. So let me ask, who really started the temptation of mankind? Well, hang on a second. Am I suggesting that Elohim would tempt someone? Well, let's read some scripture, and we'll start with Genesis 22:1. And it came to be after these events that Elohim tempted Abraham and said to him, Abraham, and he said, Hanani, here I am. Exodus 15:25. Then he cried out to Yehovah, and Yehovah showed him a tree, and when he threw it into the waters were made sweet. There he made a law and a right ruling for them, and there he tried or tempted them. Pay close attention to these next few. Deuteronomy 8:2. And you shall remember that Yehovah your Elohim led you all the way these 40 years in the wilderness to humble you, to prove or tempt you, to know what is in your heart, whether you guard his commands or not. Judges 3:4. And they were to try or tempt Israel by them to know whether they would obey the commands of Yehovah which he had commanded their fathers by the hand of Moses. Deuteronomy 13:1-3. When there arises among you a prophet or a dreamer of dreams, and he shall give you a sign or a wonder, and the sign of the wonder shall come true, of which he has spoken to you, saying, Let us go after other mighty ones which you have not known, and serve them. Do not listen to the words of that prophet or that dreamer of dreams, for Yehovah your Elohim is trying, testing, or tempting you, to know whether you love Yehovah your Elohim with all your heart and with all of your being. These are all from the same Hebrew word nasah, which means to tempt or test. So do you see, this is Elohim testing his people to see who will obey him or not through their own free will. He has continued to test people throughout human history, and we are attempting to pass that test in his eyes. We have seen how Eve looked upon the forbidden tree's fruit with new eyes and ended up putting her own desire over the command of Elohim. Isn't that how we end up sinning, when we put what we want or our own desires over the obedience to his word? We have to make sure that what we personally believe matches the word of Elohim. We have to make sure that we're not holding up some old tradition or church doctrine simply because we think it's right. Eve was tempted and tested. She wasn't lied to. And Elohim is having us tempted and tested as well. Are we going to obey or follow our own desire? Well, I hope this video blessed you. Thanks for watching, everybody, and thanks for being a part of Beit Tefillah. Please subscribe to our channel if you haven't done so yet. A shout out and a shalom to all of my brothers and sisters who are Yisrael and are scattered worldwide in the dispersion. Everybody be blessed and have a wonderful day.